here we are together in this situation in which Divine Mother has asked me to talk about twin flames in the Bible, because it doesn't matter what kind of sacred book you open, you will find information about your consciousness. You just need to maybe read the story on a different interpretation level. And there it is. And today we're going to look into the book, the Holy Bible. This is the King James Version. We are going to look at the Gospel of Matthew in the New Testament, chapter 22, 30. But I will start reading at 22, 23. You know, Jesus is going around towns to bring the news that you can go to the inner kingdom where you are in union consciousness. And you can go with him now if you want to. Just say yes and follow him. And he talks about that because it's good for your soul to do that. You will get to know yourself in a different way, how God has meant it for you. You will also attract your true twin flame. But in his time, that was like, it happened for him. It might happen for you too, but it was not on the forefront per se. The Christ masters that are on earth right now, for them it is on the forefront now, because this is a time in which we all can do it, and in which the new consciousness state is introduced and rolled out that is now known as harmonious union. To help you do that, make it possible for you to do that harmoniously and early in journey. That's what you want. That's what you come to me for. But the union consciousness in itself was already in Jesus' time, 2,000 years ago, the point. And he just forged this entrance to it for himself. I think forged is actually a wrong word because it sounds too much as if it is manipulated. That's not what it was. It's actually natural. But it was not natural yet for the people around him to do that. But he did it anyway. So in that sense, it was new. Maybe that's why I used that word. And it did attract all kinds of attention that was like not cool to his mission. There were critics that were known as very religious men that were around there in different groups. And you had the Pharisees and you had the Sadducees. And we're talking now about the Sadducees. And they would roam around there too. And they knew about Jesus and that he was teaching and whatnot. And they said, well, come here, Jesus. Let us test you. Let us test your knowledge. So we can prove that you are wrong and we are right. That was like the hobby of the Sadducees, because apparently they needed to put someone down to feel better about themselves, which is really what narcissists do. So there you go. But sometimes it is not understood that we have the Sadducees and the Pharisees, but actually these were traditional religious groups back in that day. And I mean, Jesus was not completely besides that. He did come from the traditional group in a sense, right? But he just started to speak out of his own experience of the real union consciousness reality. And then it did start to break away from what the tradition said and what these Sadducees and Pharisee narcissists said. it started to break away over time because, yeah, he just spoke out of his own real life now experience of this union consciousness. And that was alive, and it was not dead like what they did, because they were like talking about something that they didn't necessarily have. They were talking about books, book wisdom, but Jesus had reached it. That's something else. So the Sadducees, they came around in chapter 22 of Matthew, and they started to talk to Jesus and started to ask him trick questions so that they would say, "Oh, now you said it wrong, and there you go, and we were right," and just have a lot of fun among themselves. That was the idea. The same day, I'm reading now, came to him the Sadducees, which say that there is no resurrection, and asked him, saying, "Master, Moses said, if a man die, having no children, his brother shall marry his wife, and raise up seed unto his brother. Now, there were with us 7 brethren, and the first, when he had married a wife, deceased, and having no issue, left his wife unto his brother. Likewise, the second also, and the third unto the 7th. And last of all, the woman died also. Therefore, in the resurrection, whose wife shall be of the 7? For they all had her." Well, I mean, it already sounds like a trick question. They start to talk about that they all lose their wife and all these 7 brothers. And I mean, it's like an absurd situation in itself. And then they try to coax an answer out of Jesus because they want to say to him that he's wrong. It sounds like a trick question already. When someone asks you something like that, you should be aware that this is a trick question, and they're just having an alternative motive to ask such a question. You should have like a sense for narcissistic motivations in life and not answer such questions. Just ask a question back, like, why do you ask that, for instance? That's how you deal with narcissists. Jesus answered and said unto them, "Ye do err." Is that wrong? You are wrong. "Not knowing the scriptures, nor the power of God." Huh. You're wrong. You don't know the scriptures and the power of God. Well, especially the power of God, right? Because Jesus has the power of God in his experience, which is really something different than reading the Torah, because that's what they're talking about. We read Moses and he says this and this. That's the Torah. That's the Old Testament in the Bible. That's the Sadducees. They refer to the Torah, like we read about Moses and this and this. "For in the resurrection," said Jesus, "they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are as the angels of God in heaven." And that was the verse that I wanted to point to today. "For in the resurrection, they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are the angels of God in heaven." So he's just approaching this whole question differently. He's like, yeah, this absurd situation, and all these brothers, and they all lose their wife, and but who should have that wife, and don't they all own her? And really questions of like social moral action and what's right and what's wrong. And he's like, yeah, well, that whole situation, like, who cares, because you're talking about people that are not in union consciousness yet. And when you are in union consciousness, Jesus says, you're resurrected. That's what that means. Your mind is resurrected in the truth. You're in union consciousness. you're beyond death, resurrected, because Christians believe that Jesus literally died. His body died, and then he stood up from the dead again, and he was resurrected after 3 days. He just stood up again with his dead body and all and walked around again on the earth until 40 days later he flew to the Father or something, a little bit like that the story goes. But in fact, that may or may not have happened, but in fact, the resurrection is that your mind is resurrected in the truth. So that union consciousness is your direct experience. That's what will happen when you go through the consciousness change that twin flames, in fact, embody. It just means that a lot of love is collecting in your heart directly from God because you're with your true twin flame together in harmonious union. And that's how your consciousness also shifts and changes. And then at the end, yes, you go past that point of the resurrection of the mind. And that's where you're fully in harmony with your twin flame too. And you see that you have gone beyond death in consciousness because you don't believe anymore necessarily only in the flesh that is born and dies, but you live in the knowledge, in the living knowledge of the fact that you're an eternal soul together in union with your twin flame, and you live that. So, Jesus is like, well, for in resurrection they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are as the angels of God in heaven. So he's like, well, you're talking before union consciousness. And you're like, yeah, what's better? Which of the brothers should have the wife as his possession? And, because we need to know which one is right and who the woman belongs to. And Jesus, like, Jesus, man, I mean, come on. They're not in union consciousness yet. So that doesn't really say anything. When you're in union consciousness, there is not this marriage that is like possession based. It doesn't even exist. And we don't even need to talk about like we need feminism and we need this and that because what the fuck is that? Sexism and whatnot. Well, sure, but Jesus even goes beyond that, and he includes that, and he says, well, also that may be of the flesh and important temporarily, but let's go beyond it all. That's what he says. When you're resurrected in the resurrected mind, when you're in union consciousness, there is no such a thing like let's give the woman away or let's not do it because feminism and sure, but that's not the point. When you're in union consciousness, there is just you and your twin flame, and they will just flow next to each other and love each other because that's just how life is designed in the purity of the divine mind. And floating next to each other in divine love, how twin flames do, it's just as if they're angels. Because of the floatiness of it, because of the divine loving nature of it. And well, when we look very much into this verse, then it looks as though they won't marry, and then it maybe starts to sound sad, like, but I want to marry my twin flame. Okay. Well, it doesn't say that is not possible, but what it does say is that, you need to go to this place where you're in union consciousness, and that's where it will be all floating next to each other, easy in divine love. And then I would say that when that is so and fully acknowledged and really true, you might as well also marry there. And do that. Bring to marriage the being angels, as if you're angels next to each other in a resurrected mind. And that can be very valid, so no problem. Let's read a little bit further. But as touching the resurrection of the dead, have you not read that which was spoken unto you by God, saying, I am the God of Abraham, and the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob? God is not the God of the dead, but of the living. So God is not the God of the flesh. He's the God of the divine mind, of union consciousness, of truth, where you are alive, where you are beyond the resurrection. And when the multitude heard this, they were astonished at his doctrine. Well, there you go. The Sadducees were too astonished to say anything because they just hadn't any direct experience with being in twin flame union to understand what the heck he was talking about. But they had maybe enough of a sense of, it sounds true, to be shut up. So, which is also how you deal with narcissists, which is also what a narcissist, what constitutes a narcissist, because that's when you're confined in your dead body and you don't feel or think any further than your body. And that's how you deny that you're a twin flame. And that's how you can't go to union consciousness and you can't go to union. So, yeah, I love it. How did you like that? Shall we do more Bible twin flame stories? Let me know.